Today, we are going to talk about one of the most powerful and yet consistently overlooked strategic assets out there. It's something every single one of us has, but honestly, very few of us truly master. And it all kicks off with a simple design feature we totally take for granted. It really starts with a simple, almost childlike question, right? Why do we have two ears, but only one mouth? Now, think about it. This is probably not some random accident of biology. It feels more like a design feature, something humanity has been pondering for, well, millennia. So what is this design trying to tell us? Well, the ancient Greek Stoics, who were basically the masters of self-control, they had a pretty clear answer. For Epictetus, this wasn't just an anatomy, it was like a built-in instruction manual for living an effective life. Listening is an act of control and discipline, while just blurting things out, well, that's the exact opposite. And this wisdom isn't just isolated to the Stoics. Take a look here in the biblical tradition. It's laid out almost like a formula, a moral command. Being quick to listen is the first step, the thing that lets you be slow to speak, and that is what stops you from getting to destructive anger or wrath. See the chain reaction? And this idea of value, it just echoes across cultures. Check out this proverb from the Arab world. Yeah, speech is valuable. It's silver, for sure. But silence, that space you create for intentional listening, that gets the highest value. It's golden. It's not just the absence of sound. It's a strategic asset. So this is clearly not a coincidence. You've got Stoicism, Abrahamic religions, proverbs from all over the world, and they all point to the same truth. Our physical design hints at a piece of universal human wisdom. What we take in should always be more than what we put out. Okay, so how do we actually take this ancient philosophy and turn it into a concrete, modern strategy? How do we take this universal truth and, use it in our day-to-day lives? The secret sauce behind that 2-to-1 rule is a concept we can call prudent pacing. And this isn't just about pausing for dramatic effect. No, it's about forcing yourself to have a mental gap, a cognitive delay between what you hear and how you react. It's literally your best defense against impulse, mistakes, and unnecessary conflict.
And get this, the direct descendant of this ancient wisdom is something you've probably heard of. Prudent pacing is the philosophical why, and what we now call active listening is the practical how.
So how do we actually do it? Well, active listening is, it's active. It's not passive. First, you have to be fully present. No multitasking, no checking your phone. Second, you paraphrase back what you heard. Something like, okay, so what I'm hearing is this. This proves you actually got it. Third, you ask open-ended questions to dig deeper, not to corner them. And finally, and this is crucial, you validate their perspective, even if you totally disagree. Just acknowledging their feelings builds incredible trust. All right, so what's the big payoff for all this effort? Mastering this skill isn't just about being a nicer person. It's about gaining a real, tangible, strategic advantage in your career and, frankly, your entire life. And just look at the ripple effect here, the compounding returns. Better listening immediately boosts your emotional intelligence. In a negotiation, it helps you uncover what the other side really wants, giving you a huge tactical edge. On a team, it creates the psychological safety people need to actually innovate and share ideas. And at the very top, it's the foundation of all organizational trust. And hey, don't just take my word for it. The World Economic Forum, the folks who analyze global economic trends for a living, they've flagged this. Empathy and active listening are not soft skills anymore. They are essential economic tools for the future of work. Period. Let's just put this into a high-stakes scenario. The passive here, they're just waiting for their turn to talk. They're already planning their rebuttal, and they're missing crucial info. The active listener, on the other hand, they're like a detective on a mission to understand the why behind the what. They gather all the information, which lets them find deals the other side didn't even know were on the table. One leads to a brick wall. The other unlocks a whole new level of value. So far, we've talked a lot about the upside, but what about the flip side? What happens when we get this wrong? Well, the consequences of failing to listen aren't just some abstract idea, they are catastrophic, and they come with a jaw-dropping price tag. Yeah, you are seeing that correctly. Studies estimate that miscommunication, which is almost always rooted in poor listening, costs U.S. businesses up to $1.2 trillion every single year. That is the mind-boggling cost of just not paying attention. Now, let's break that insane number down a bit. For just one employee, communication problems can cost a company over $26,000 a year in lost productivity and having to redo work. And on a bigger scale, poor communication leads to delayed or totally failed projects in nearly half of all companies. These are real, painful, quantifiable losses. So where does a trillion-dollar bill even come from? It's not from one big disaster. No, it's death by 1,000 cuts. It's the sum of millions of misunderstood emails, garbled instructions, and great ideas that get buried every single day. Let me show you a couple of quick examples. Case in point, a supervisor sends out this one-sentence memo to 36 people to clarify an overtime policy. But the language is so ridiculously complicated that it generates 26 phone calls from people just asking what on earth it means. A whole week of productivity was just vaporized trying to figure out a single sentence that completely failed to communicate. Or think about this cautionary tale. A brilliant chemist mentions a breakthrough idea for a new, safe insecticide at the very end of a super dense report. Of course, nobody pays attention. 7 years later, the company spends a fortune trying to invent that exact same product, only to find the answer was sitting in their own files the entire time. And the chemist? Oh, he'd quit years ago feeling totally unheard. The cost here wasn't just money. It was a 7-year head start handed to their competitors. So the cost of failure is crystal clear. The key, then, is to stop seeing listening as some passive, soft activity and start treating it as your most powerful, controllable, and incredibly valuable strategic asset. So how do we fix this? How do we recalibrate? First, organizations need to make that cognitive delay a part of the system, using frameworks that force people to listen before they react. Second, we have to make listening a measurable leadership skill and actually promote the people who are great at it. And third, we have to build a culture where silence is valued as strategic gold, a moment for reflection, not a sign of weakness or uncertainty. I want to leave you with this really powerful metaphor from the Bambara people of Mali. It just perfectly sums up everything we've talked about. Meaningful speech, the child, can only be born from thoughtful silence, and reflection, the mother. Wisdom has to be there on the inside before it can ever come out. And so, the big question for you to take away today is this. When you choose to be silent and listen, are you making a strategic investment? Is your silence earning you interest in the form of trust and information and new opportunities? Or is your failure to listen quietly costing you an absolute fortune?